As I have mentioned before, history starts with writing. So anything that happened before the invention of writing is called prehistory. Previously, we talked about the Stone Age, when our ancestors, the southern apes, started using a stone about 2 million years ago. Yes, you heard it right. We are a branch of apes, and our closest relative to us who still exists is chimpanzee. The first generation who used the stone tools are the southern ape from Africa. As we mentioned before, Stone Age is divided to periods. The longest and the oldest part is Paleolithic period. It started 2 million years ago and it continued all the way to almost recently, 10,000 years ago. The last era in the Stone Age is Neolithic. It is the beginning of an important revolution in human history. We became farmer. We were having more permanent houses, we planted foods, and also we tamed animals. Stone Age ended with Bronze Age, which humans replaced using stone tools with bronze tools. That was another important turning point in human history. Instead of using the stone tools, we started using metal tools. So instead of stone hammer, now we have bronze swords, arrows, armors, and farmers became warriors. Anyway, Bronze Age is the beginning of the era of the war as we are familiar with today. Previously, we talked about the immigration that happened 100,000 years ago from Africa all the way to Europe, Asia, Australia, and also finally ended with America. We talked about Homo sapien like Neanderthal and Homo sapien sapien like us, modern human. We also went through the timeline of making objects from 2 million years ago that our ancestors, the southern ape, walked upright, made first tools, to 1.6 million years ago when we had significant progress in making tools. And then 77,000 years ago when we made the first art piece that are 2 pieces of stone with similar patterns on them. We found them in South Africa. And finally, almost 40,000 years ago, we found first representational images on the walls of the caves. Now imagine you have stone tools. You can hunt better and catch bigger animals. You can defend yourself. You can dig the ground or cut the branches, bones, animals' skin. The life is much better, isn't it? Now what is next? What else do you need? You may guess that. Yes, now we need a roof, a shelter. We need architecture. The word architecture usually refers to a closed space, and it should usually have some consideration of beauty. Before we start actual architecture, we only had a shelter, which didn't need that much of planning or imagination. Shelter can be just a cave or a big tree with some branches and leaves, but architecture means pre-planning, require a specific material, and it means more permanent place to live. The very first example of architecture we can find in Russia. It's been 16 to 10,000 BCE, which means that about 18 to 12,000 years ago, there were a group of people in Ukraine who started living in more permanent houses. Their houses were made with mammoth tusk and the floor was covered with colored ochre. It means that they cared about the beauty of their place as well. Inside 15 of those shelters, they found small fireplaces that they contain ashes and leftovers of burned bones and foods. What do you see here? Imagine you're on a phone and you're looking at this picture and explaining what you're looking at to the person on the phone. How you would do it? What would you mention? What does it look like? Is it animal? Human? Hybrid of both animal and human? If you look closely, you see this small sculpture is hybrid of human body and animal's head, probably a lion. Let's watch this video together.
There are over 4,000 religions existing in the world, and 85% of the world's people are considered to be believers. And through time and across the world, we have no knowledge of a society that doesn't have beliefs. It seems to be a natural characteristic, a product of our hugely inventive minds, that we communicate with beings and worlds beyond nature. As fully modern people, we go back 100,000 years, and certainly we recognise in the archaeological record from Africa and from Southeast Asia and Australasia really ancient things that show the modern human species beginning to symbolise thoughts. The oldest object that we have, which shows us very clearly that we are having a conversation with something that does not exist in nature, is the figure of the Lion Man. The Lion Man is made of mammoth ivory. This is the biggest animal in the late Ice Age environment. The fiercest animal in the environment was the cave lion, bigger than a modern African lion, without a mane, a huge fierce creature. What the sculptor who made the Lion Man has done is to combine the mammoth, the lion and the human. So we have human legs and groin, the navel in the correct place for a human being, and then as you come up the body, you come into these immensely broad and strong shoulders and the head of a lion, made with such naturalism that we can see that he's watching, that he's listening. The little furrow behind his ear is the furrow created as the muscles tense for the ear to be turned and alert while listening. His eyes are looking forward, and his mouth in this extraordinary grin. This combination of human and animal features, this alertness, this participation, suggests that there's a conversation going on here. A conversation of a human who is so much part of nature, who wears clothes, makes tools, has fire, but yet is in awe of this fierce lion from whom it's important to protect oneself, but also to admire. This is a really important conversation happening here. Now, I can't say whether this sculpture represents an avatar or a deity or a creation story. None of that really matters. What matters is this conversation, this sign of mind, and this sign of using a belief in beings and worlds beyond nature that help us to get by, that help us to give us meaning and understanding and to overcome the things that frighten us, but also to share stories with one another around the fire. And we know this has happened with the Lion Man because his body is polished by the wear of being passed from hand to hand. And he's found in a cave, Stadel Cave, not far from Ulm in Baden-Württemberg. Deep in its recesses, the Lion Man was carefully put away after sharing stories around the fire, bonding, socialising, planning for tomorrow, thinking about the possibilities. So it shows beliefs in other worlds, in other beings, being a really important part for social cohesion and for confidence of human beings to have meaning and carry on with their lives.
The most important thing about this object is this is a mythical creature, something that doesn't exist in the world. It is formed by a creative imagination and doesn't exist in the nature. What do you see here? Is this animal, human, Male? Female? We need to remember that calling her Venus is incorrect. We do not know why this was built and what does it mean. It may be a goddess or just a female figure or represent fertility or beauty or peace or something that we don't have any idea about. This is small sculpture made out of limestone. It's definitely meant to be held in hand. It doesn't have a feet to stand on. And it's small, so you can hold it in your hand easily. The big breast and chubby belly is usually a symbol of nourished body, health, fertility, and wealth. We need to remember that calling her Venus is incorrect. We do not know why this was built. What does it mean? It may be a goddess or just a female figure, or represent fertility or beauty or peace or something that we don't have any idea about. Let's watch this video together.
People love definitive answers. We really want to have a clear understanding of everything we see, art historians especially so. But people also love to make things. We love to make art. And one of the oldest works of art in the world, yet found, is a small female figurine that's sometimes simply called female nude, but is still universally known as the Venus of Willendorf, a name that makes no sense whatsoever, but really speaks to the lens that our culture looks through.
She acquired the name Venus when she was found in 1908 in a village in Austria called Willendorf. She's only about 11 centimeters high, and she dates from about 25,000 years ago. So she's really old. And in the museum in Vienna, where we're looking at her in the Natural History Museum, they've shrouded her in darkness in a glass case illuminated from above. The outside looks like a Greek temple, and on it it says Venus of Willendorf.
And in fact, in the temple, there's a little button, because remember, this is a science museum. Lots of kids, and kids love to push buttons. And when they do, the white light on the figurine turns red, and a little flute music starts. Now, of course, we have no idea if these people listen to music, what that music would have been. It's really an attempt to fill in all the gaps. We know almost nothing about her. We don't know why she was made, who made her. What we have is the figure and virtually no context. It is in some ways an anthropological object rather than an art object.
By giving her the name of an ancient Greek goddess, the goddess of love, Venus, we were assigning meaning to her, a meaning of her being a goddess figure and somehow associated with fertility.
Now, we have no reason to believe any of that is true. I suppose we do have a little bit more context, and that is, this is only one of quite a number of female figures that have been found from this era. This is during the last ice age, and it's some of the first figural sculpture that we've seen. What's interesting is that almost all of the sculptures that have been found have been female figures.
We should say all the figures that have been found so far are female figures, and they're nude, but they're of different shapes. Some exaggerate the breasts and buttocks, but others are thin. But maybe in 10 years or 100 years, art historians and archaeologists will find male figures.
So all of this is guesswork. All we've got to look at is the figure itself. Let's take a close look.
She has no feet and very thin arms, which she rests high up on her breast. And she has no facial features.
That's consistent with almost all of the figures from this period that have been found. There is a careful rendering of the hair, or perhaps a woven hat that's on her head. Some archaeologists have suggested that this might be a reed hat that she wears.
Oh, there's the music and the red light.
That's right, a small girl has just pushed the button. The hands are articulated ever so slightly, defining the fingers. And archaeologists who've looked at this carefully have suggested that perhaps the exaggeration of the stomach and of the breasts and of the head, the sort of bulbous shapes throughout, are partially a result of the natural shape of the stone. This is a limestone object. She's symmetrical and is clearly not something that was meant to stand up. As you mentioned, there were no feet, but this is a figure that would easily fill a hand. And you have the sense that this is something that was meant to be held.
Carried in a pocket, perhaps, something like that. She does fit comfortably in a hand. We know that she was originally painted with ochre paint, a kind of red paint. beyond that, it's really hard to say much more.
So we'll continue to be fascinated by it. Art historians will continue to try to find answers. But in some ways, I'm sure we'll always fall into the trap of reflecting our own interests and our own needs as we try to understand this object. I'm not sure that we'll ever fully understand it or be able to retrieve its original meanings.
No.
Another example of female figures that were found in Czech Republic are these fired clay small sculptures that were designed to get broken and explode in the kiln during the firing process. We don't know why they should have been exploded, but we found dozens of them that were all built in the same way, and they all were broken in the kiln. Woman of Brassenpai is another example of developed artistic mind of Paleolithic human. This small sculpture, which is a little more than 1-inch portrait of a female, is beautiful, abstracted image that, although it's definitely recognizable as a female face, but it's simplified and abstracted in a perfect way almost 30,000 years ago in Brassenpai, France. There are similar design figurines that we can find them all over the world. We don't know what was the function of these figures. Some believe these female figurines were symbol of acceptance, friendship, and interaction that was traded between the group of peoples who were traveling, hunting, and gatherings. Another common art-making practice that we can find almost all over the world is cave painting. There are a few different ways that archaeologists believe these images are created. One way to create the lines is chewing and mixing the pigment with saliva and then spray them through the mouth, although they can be sprayed through hollow bones as a straw too. Many of these images are drawn by fingers or using the blocks of charcoal or ochre or other pigments directly on the surface of the wall. Another advanced technique in prehistory period is attaching animals' hair or human hair to wooden sticks or bone and make some kind of a paintbrush. In some caves, we see the artists have used the natural formation of rock or actually engraved the images on the surface of the rock and then filled them with a pigment later. Here we see a spraying technique that's been used to create a copy of a hand on the wall. But why we find cave painting almost all over the world? Why this is such a common practice in prehistory? We cannot say for sure what is the reason. Remember, this is prehistory. We don't have writing. We only can see the images and interpret the meaning and reasons. Some believe that these are only a statistic. They were created for the sake of beauty. Some people believe that these images had magical power. Maybe this was helping the Paleolithic hunters to have a successful hunt. Some believe that drawing animals with their offsprings are symbol of fertility. Some say these are part of a ritual ceremony. Images of an animal, handprint, they're all place of worship. And some believe that these are like the smartboard we use in our classroom. These are the places that they could share knowledge with their children or others through visual elements. The only thing we know is they are drawn by people who were very well aware of anatomy and shape of animals' body. For example, in Chauvet in France, we found drawings, footprints, drawings of animals like horses, bisons, birds, panthers. Also, we found footprints of female, male, and even children's. The drawings we found in Chauvet were created 34,000 years ago. Lascaux is another famous cave in France that was found accidentally by 18-year-old boy who his dog fell in a hole and he was looking for him.
Overlooking the village of Montignac in France's Dordogne region, the Lascaux Caves are an underground art treasure classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Discovered in 1940, the site was closed to the public in 1963 because high visitor numbers were causing damage to the paintings. As the Sistine Chapel of prehistoric art, the cavity is 200 metres long, alternating between chambers and gallery corridors. Imposing and arranged according to height, the frescoes were created with great finesse. In all, more than 600 animals are represented, accompanied by mysterious symbols. Horses, bulls and stags mixed with the occasional carnivore and a single human silhouette. Prehistorians believe it was a sanctuary, a monument with a religious character. Using animal fat lamps and torches, the prehistoric artists are believed to have used a rudimentary type of scaffolding to paint the 3-metre-high frescoes. They used hair and vegetable fibres as brushes, blocks of pigment and their fingers, but also stamps and stencils. They also used a type of early spray paint technique with paint chewed into a paste and spat out or blown through a tube. Rock was also engraved where possible using a flint tool. Colours were made using natural materials like manganese for black and iron oxides for warm colours like reds and yellows. The artists knew how to plot scenes and combined several techniques to create shade, movement, layers and give the illusion of perspective. Their work, traversing so many millennia, continues to inspire artists today.
More than 600 drawing and painting and 1,500 engravings were found in Lascaux Cave. To create many of them, they should have had some sort of a scaffolding. And definitely they were using light sources like oil lamp as they were drawing in those dark caverns. Most famous part of Lascaux Cave is Hall of Bulls, which shows herds of cows, bulls, horses, and deers. As we look at these cave paintings, we notice they have composite view or twisted perspective. It means that to make sure all parts of animal's body are shown and are recognizable, the artists have changed the viewpoint as was drawing the animal. For example, in this picture of a bull, we see the head and the body in profile view, but the horns are frontal view. The artist wanted to show both horns perfectly. What do you see here? What is happening? Is there any interaction between this figure and this figure? Again, we don't know what is going on. We only guess based on visual evidence. What we see here is a man with the head of a bird. We see a bison that is wounded. And it seems that his intestine is pouring out of his body. And there is an arrow that is penetrating and hurting this animal. There is a staff with a bird on top of it. There should be some sort of interaction between them. The bison is getting killed. The man may be dead. But also this man can confronting the animal. Maybe he's the owner of this magical staff. This is the first time that we see images with a narrative about a happening. This is our earliest attempt of a storytelling through images. We don't know if the painting we found in Lascaux is a myth or actual event. Maybe this is a story that is created by an artist based on a factual event. Look at these gorgeous animals. They're very three-dimensional. The artists had used the natural formation of rock to give the animals more three-dimensional body. 12,000 years ago, in Altamira, Spain, they found a sculpture of painting that were painted with red and brown ochre. The artist skillfully used the form of a stone and rocks to show the body of the animal in more three-dimensional way. Here are examples of engraved images that artists carved the form of animal body from that stone in France 15,000 years ago.